Welcome back as we continue with Let's Have It Out. I am still with Professor Metcalfe. We are talking about the state of basic education in our country. Give us a call. First, let's perhaps read a couple of your Facebook comments. I've got a comment from Marlon Brendan Mosaville. He says, "We've messed up a whole generation with this nothingness. Steel pit toilets, and now kids are killing teachers. Great policies from our rulers to thank." Secondly, I've got another Facebook comment from Sipho Skakan, who says indigenous official languages are sidelined by the system of education. Students are continuously made to think, analyze, behave like Europeans, ditching their own ways of life under the watch of the so-called black government. I've got another comment on Facebook from David Fori, who says, "Our current education system is a joke. Bring back corporal punishment so kids can learn to respect each other, their teachers, and their parents." I am very keen to hear your views about that. Let's start with the last comment in particular. I can tell you that, as a union, the South African Democratic Teachers Union, we are vehemently against an intervention that would take the form of corporal punishment. We are saying that you cannot use violence to deter violence. It cannot be the right way of thinking, but it is still about societal involvement, parental involvement. What is your take about that?
I absolutely agree with you that to be physically violent against a person to teach them to behave just completely goes against the grain. If we want to have learners who are being prepared to take their place in society as people who belong, who feel they belong, we need to have schools, firstly, where there's a sense of order. Now, this is a very interesting concept, sense of order. You and I, as educators, can go to 10 schools. In the first 5 minutes, you get a sense of what's happening at the school because of the way that people respect each other, respect the environment, treat each other. The chaos in some schools, that bubbling sense of disrespect and people being outside of classrooms and toilets being filthy, those are kinds of schools where learners are not learning the basics of self-discipline, of mutual respect. So it's a sense of order in the school. It's the way that learners are valued in the school. It's the way that learners have multiple opportunities to have and grow their sense of self-esteem. This question links very much to the first question or even the second question, because generally people have a narrative about education that I hope we've got enough time to talk about this, because the narrative about education is our standards are too low, children or whatever. Actually, our concern should be we have young people who are capable, intelligent, who have the potential to build this country, but we put them through an education system where by grade 4 the majority are beginning to fail, and by the time they get to grade 7 more than the majority is failing, and by grade 10 50% are dropping out. That should be our concern. What do we need to do within the education system to make all young people feel that they belong, that they're valued, that they are going to contribute to society? By treating young people as if they have nothing of any value and they should just leave. It's the greatest damage that we can do to this country.
But then my question, Prof, is that when we refer to the issue of discipline in the classroom in particular, just today, the Department of Basic Education convened a one-day national summit on school safety. And that is, of course, on the basis as well of the recent violent images that we have seen going viral across a multitude of platforms. Now, it shows you that we have probably reached a situation whereby we can say this is a national crisis. But now my question to you is, how did we get here? Could this be a reflection of how the perceptions are changing about education? I'll give you an example. It's very easy during a community protests for community members to burn down a school as a form of a bargaining chip. But that will not necessarily happen in other institutions. You know, that could be a tavern, that could be a church, for that matter. How do you think we got here? Where did we get it wrong? And what can we do to get it right?
This is the subject for a PhD, but let me try. I think that, firstly, if we have schools where teachers are supported, where learners are supported, you have the correct climate. Secondly, one of the things that interests me is the social distance that we have between schools and communities for multiple reasons. Number one, when you have a country where there are such high levels of poverty, where you have a country where there are the phenomenon of absent parents and absent fathers, where you have a country where our youth have 50% of our youth have left school and got very little chance of being employed. You have high levels of behavior such as drug taking, alcoholism. In many of the schools where you see these problems, you only have to walk through the school building from outside to begin to identify, wait a minute, this is where the drugs are coming in. This is where the chisanama is. This is where the children are going at break time. Now, teachers cannot solve problems of community dysfunction and family dysfunction on their own. But the whole character of diagnosis is one of blaming. I am convinced, and there are so many examples, I wish that maybe you and I should make some movies of going to outstanding principals and letting them tell us what they've done to bring community into school, to support families, to understand poverty, to build self-esteem within the school, to build routines. There is a lot of that happening, but many principals feel unsupported, blamed, on their own. They feel officials coming and not saying, how can I help you, but saying, it's your fault.
And this is what you're doing wrong. Absolutely, I agree with you. It's all about the societal involvement. It's the community. It takes a community to raise it takes a village to raise a child. Let me take your calls. Our first caller is John from Limpopo. Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Okay, thank you very much for taking my call. I have a question here. How come our government sells off our educational system? Because it appears that our educational system is transactional. Not long ago, the government made a pronouncement that Swahili is going to be offered in our schools. And if my memory still serves me well, about 4 years ago, the former President Jacob Zuma said Mandarin was going to be offered in schools. How come we sell of ourselves? Now that South African government intends on doing business with countries in Africa where Swahili is one of the main languages, we are bound to, bound to economic pressure, then adopt Swahili as one of the languages. How come you implement something that is not implementable or does not even exist in some universities? Give me one university in South Africa that offers Swahili as one of the official languages. You've got teachers that are expected to teach Swahili, and these are the very teachers who were brought up in an educational system where they had to learn English. Even now, they are still struggling to teach that very English. You expect Swahili to be implemented. How implementable will that be? Now we talk about Chinese. Now they're being accused of being the new colonizers of Africa. Now that we are doing business with China, Mandarin has to be part of our languages in our schooling system. Who's going to teach Mandarin?
Okay. All right, thank you, John. We appreciate the call, and I think we get the gist of that, really.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yes, I would like to link what John was asking to what Sipho said from Facebook. Because Sipho raised a very important question, which I think relates.
Absolutely.
Because Sipho was saying, why do we not do more to use our indigenous languages? And I want to agree with Sipho.
So you fully agree?
Well, one of my concerns is that the teaching of reading in the foundation phase is probably the most crucial opportunity to learn that shapes your future direction in education. The children that haven't really learned to read by the end of grade 3 and are going into grade 4 are on a slippery slope, because by the time they get into grade 4, two things happen. For the majority of children in this country, they start learning in a second language, and they start learning through textbooks. It's much more based on reading and writing than in foundation phase. In foundation phase, our absolute national priority is to provide teachers with the support and children and teachers with the resources so that by the end of grade 3, children are reading confidently in their first language.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They should be learning other languages for purposes of communication.
Yeah.
But reading in your first language is fundamental.
Absolutely. I must say I agree with you, Prof, especially the emphasis as well on the early stages of education. Still to come, you can be part of my conversation on the state of basic education in this particular country as we go for an ad break.